Welcome, Peckinpah fans, and thanks for joining us for this debut episode of Bloody Sam, a Peckinpah fan podcast. I'm your host, Scott Murphy, and over the course of the next 14 months, I will be looking at each of Peckinpah's 14 theatrically released films. Each month, we will also feature a very special guest, and this month's special guest is writer, director, and one third of Bloodhound Picks. It's Mr. Kyle Hintz. Hey, Kyle.
Hello.
Welcome to this brand new show.
It's great to be here. It's good to be back.
Yeah. And yes. We were just talking off record that you started all 90s action all the time with me, and now you're
Yes.
starting this podcast, and this could become a new tradition if I start other podcasts going forward.
I'm here to be your good luck charm.
Excellent, excellent. So, before we get into it, I will give some stats and facts on this particular film. So, Peckinpah's debut film, The Deadly Companions, was released on the 6th of June, 1961. The script was written by A.S. Fleischman, who adapted it from his own novel. Critically, it is currently sitting at a somewhat misleading 83%, based on 6 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, while the 6 out of 10 on IMDb and the 3.0 on Letterboxd more accurately reflect both the middling reception it received in the early 60s and the middling reputation it still kind of has now, if it has a reputation, which we'll get into. I couldn't find any solid box office information, but I do understand from looking up various articles it was not a commercial success, despite it being a rather low budget film. And today it still remains the least known of Peckinpah's films. And I have to say, I've not seen all of Peckinpah's films. I've seen just under half of his filmography at this point, as we start our journey. But I had heard of all of the other ones apart from this. Before I had started this project, I had never heard of this film. So, Kyle, had you ever heard of this film, The Deadly Companions?
I mean, I have seen it before because I was a Peckinpah fan, but
Yep.
it was definitely one of the last ones that I came around to seeing because just out of curiosity, but not one with any real reputation,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure. And is there anything that you retained from the first time watch that before going into this rewatch?
No, not I mean, just the basic story. Nothing that was like, oh, this stood out, to be honest.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Fair enough. So so this was a first time watch for me, but a rewatch for yourself. Now, yeah, it's interesting reading into this film because it seems like there's some misinformation out there. So it seems to some articles seem to suggest that this movie was made. It was like a reteaming of Brian Keith and Maureen O'Hara, based on the success of The Parent Trap. But actually, this film actually came out 2 weeks before The Parent Trap, so that is
Mm,
wrong.
funny.
So that's quite funny. And it seems like the main instigation for this picture was the producer of the picture was Charles B. Fitzsimmons, who is the younger brother of Maureen O'Hara, whose birth name was Fitzsimmons. And it seems like her career was starting to slow down in the late 50s after being a big star in the 40s and through into the mid 50s. It seemed at this point it was kind of slowing down, so they decided to throw together this kind of low budget western to try and give her a kind of a second wind. And even though this film didn't give her that, She did actually get a second wind from The Parent Trap, and then she had a couple other successes in the '60s, like the Western comedy McClintock, and a couple of other things. So she did get a second wind, but just not via this film.
Which makes sense once we get to the film.
Once we get into this. And yes, I guess the other bit of backstory I should give to the film before we get into the film is that Peckinpah came on board in this because the male lead of the film, Brian Keith, starred in a TV series that lasted for one season called The Westerner that Peckinpah was the creator of and wrote a number of episodes, directed 5 of the 13 episodes, and obviously became friendly with Brian Keith. And it was Brian Keith who recommended Peckinpah for this project. So that's how he came on board. Yeah. So I guess we can start to get in to the Deadly
Yeah.
Companions. It like I'm going to spoil something ahead of time. I was not the biggest fan of this film, but it has some moments, and I think
Mhm.
the opening scene is one of the moments. I think the opening scene is intriguing. We see Brian Keith's character. He's in a bar, and we see a group of guys playing some cards, and also the character played by Chill Wills, Turk, the character played by Chill Wills, he is balancing on a barrel, hanging, and it looks like he's about to lose his footing and be hanged and die. And Brian Keith, along with the help of the other character, Brian, Billy, he frees Chilwell's character. I think it's a good way to start the film because you're kind of intrigued. It kind of seems like the Brian Keith's character's maybe, who's the character's called Yellowleg is maybe friends with this character, but then you're not
Mhm.
quite sure. And then it just seems like they're not friends. And so you're intrigued why he got himself embroiled in this situation in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like it's a strong opening. And obviously, and we'll get to the kind of reversal, if you want to call it that, of why he actually saved Chill Wills' life, which makes it more interesting for sure. Or I
Mm,
mean, we can touch on that. I mean, that comes up in a couple scenes from now, right?
yeah, I mean, I guess that's true because he tells a doctor guy when
Yeah, because we see, and
yeah,
we see that like briefly, kind of like a close up of Chillwell's hand with a weird scar, or what we find out to be teeth marks
yeah,
in his
yeah,
hand. Yeah.
yeah. So that is all. I mean, like you, yeah. Basically, there was a situation, and it initially kind of because they kind of play with it because like
Hmm.
basically Yellowleg, Brian Keith's character won't take his off his hat ever. And
Hmm.
we find out pretty soon in, not that far into the movie that it is because he has a scar across his head where somebody attempted to scalp him. And I think there's a little bit of a misdirect because it's kind of that thing of they try and kind of set it up as like oh, it's like an Apache attack or something like that, but
Right.
you're not quite sure. But then it becomes apparent that it was the Turk character, and the whole reason of saving him was for vengeance to get revenge.
Yeah. Which is such a good setup. And then I feel like this movie does not really like give you what you want out of that part of the story. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah,
such a good idea. And then this movie is just not have really that much excitement or energy behind that idea.
yeah, I think that's yeah, I think because like I do think it's really I think it's really in the middle of the movie that really sucks the life out of the movie. Because I think
Hmm.
there's a bunch of interesting stuff here. I think, like you say, I think that's an interesting concept about like he saved this guy's life to get revenge on the guy because the guy attempted to scalp him. And so we're setting that up, but and then even the stuff early on where we're kind of set up that like Billy and Turk are like bad guys, and like the way they're menacing the kind of the congregation who uh, who are praying at the bar because they don't have a church. They just the bar shuts
Yes.
down. And even that, there's some humor to that of like,
Yeah.
when they first come into town and like and the barman says that like, oh, we've not had a calendar for 2 years. Some people think it's Sunday, some people think it's Monday. So I think a lot of the stuff initially in the town is
Yeah.
is good, and I think there's some interesting stuff there, and I also think
Mhm.
there's some quite humorous stuff there. Um, but then once the kind of, I mean, I guess the inciting incident for the other plot of the film is
Mhm.
there is a bank heist that goes wrong, and that leads to Yellowleg accidentally killing the child, the son of Maureen O'Hara's character, Kit. And then kind of I don't know. Like, so I think, what did you think? Like, in terms of that initial, beyond the opening scene, in terms of that initial setup, the stuff that happens in the town, I think there's a lot of foundations there in terms of the way they set up Yellowleg's character, the way that they set up Billy and Turk's character, even the way they set up Kit's
Mhm.
character, and how Kit is kind of an outsider in the town, and everybody looks down on her, and and like the way people are bitching about her literally behind her back, in earshot,
Mhm.
in the church sermon. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff there in those opening kind of, I don't know, like 15 minutes, let's say, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's a lot of fertile ground to make what should have been a better story. And maybe like, because I read some about the movie too, and I know that like Peckinpah wasn't allowed to, do any work on the script himself.
Hmm.
And maybe
That's
if he
correct.
had been able to, he would have kind of brought some more out of it. Because what's interesting is like there is a lot of proto-Peckinpah type stuff. Like the whole
Hmm.
idea of having church in a bar and this
Yep.
kind of, yeah, this kind of dichotomy of how really uncivilized the world that we're in is, but we have this little idea of civilization that's going to take place in the bar right now. We're going to cover up these paintings of nude women, and we're not going to serve any alcohol now because we're doing church, and all the church people being as ostensibly hypocrites because they're very judgmental of Kit,
Yeah.
who we
Yeah.
don't. All we know is she's it seems like she's a dancer in this local dance hall, but obviously that's especially for the times of this film, maybe she might actually be more like a prostitute, but it's very toned down in this story.
Yeah. We're never, it's never kind of fully conveyed like what she is. There's
Yeah,
kind of vague suggestions that she might be a prostitute. Particularly what later on, when there's a scene later on about you know
yeah,
um but then again, yeah, she might just be a dancer. We don't really know. Like she might just be like a showgirl, basically. But or she might be
yeah,
a prostitute or both. So we're not fully convinced of that. Again, I guess it's the very early '60s, so they kind of still are
yeah. They're
really
not getting into it.
skirting around that kind of stuff a lot of the time. So yeah, yeah. But I think I don't like you say there is a bunch of stuff in terms of like the kind of cynical outlook of the film, and in terms of the fact that like Yellowleg actually not like a fully formed Peckinpah lead, but he's like basically Brian Keith's character. He's not like Gary Cooper. He's very
Yeah,
much closer to the kind of Peckinpah anti-hero than he is, your classic, kind of 40s, 50 Western hero.
yeah. Especially considering, I mean, yeah, the main whole point of where we go with this movie is that he accidentally killed a kid, and now he's feels it's his duty to help bury this kid where she wants to bury him, and going through dangerous territory and all this stuff is like,
Mhm.
yeah, a guy who's morally a character who's somewhat in a gray area, but has his own like set of morals that he's going to go by, or his own code.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's not, yeah. So he's still got kind of some redeeming quality to him. He's not quite as
Mm,
he's not quite as shitty as some later Peckinpah leads. You know, like
yeah, yeah. Well,
um,
and even this plot does remind me a bit of like bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia, because
a
essentially
little bit, yeah,
the whole thing is like this kind of foolish, dogged mission to do something that's like pointless, really. I mean, it has
yeah.
meaning for Catherine or Maureen O'Hara, but it's like, I mean, what does it matter where you bury him at this point? I mean, now she's lost her husband and her kid, which we'll get into, but
Yeah,
you know,
no, absolutely, absolutely. So I mean, that's kind of the next plot point because, like, um, so basically, as I kind of mentioned, Billy, Turk, and Yellowleg are planning. They come to this town to rob the town's bank, basically. But another outlaw gang beats them to the punch.
yes,
Um, and then, um, and it's interesting as well the kind of morality of that because
right.
the other bank robber gang are treated as if they are way more shitty people than
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
than our quote unquote heroes of being like, yeah, they were going to rob it, but they weren't just going to aimlessly kill people. They were just going
Right,
to be
yeah.
very pleasant, gentlemanly robbers. So like it is interesting the morality of that. But in this shootout, the melee of kind of they end up kind of by accident protecting the town by trying to have a shootout with the
Yeah.
with the with the bank robbers. And then this leads to the accidental death of Kit's son. And then Kit is determined that she wants the son to be buried with the with her husband, who like as she mentions later on in the movie, she was actually only married to him for like a couple of months. But like
Hmm.
she wants him to be to be buried out there, and nobody wants to go with her because that town is being overrun and is now in Apache territory. And so everybody is scared and don't want to risk that. But Yellowleg is wants to go, and like it's interesting how Billy and Turk are portrayed because
Hmm.
sometimes they're portrayed as like kind of like big bad villains of like they're a couple of ruthless kind of outlaws. And then other times they just kind of meekly go along with what Yellowleg says, even though they don't really seem to have a lot of
Yeah.
motivation to do
I mean, I
that.
feel like they have like no motivation. I mean, they definitely also play as kind of like our comic relief.
Yes, they
But
kind
yeah,
of double up. Yeah.
well, at least in the beginning when Yellowleg, how we get to the town, him suggesting, "Hey, we'll go rob this bank," is like, okay, it makes sense for them to go along, even though they're unsure of him or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, clearly this mission to go to Apache territory to bury Kit's son is like, these guys don't care about that at all. Billy
No.
wants to sleep with her, obviously, so he's going for that reason. But aside from that, they have like no motivation.
Yeah. Cause like I don't know, they really don't. And like Turk seems to want to go because he thinks that there might be money out there. And he keeps going on
Yeah,
about building a slave Indian army, which is
yeah,
like,
dude,
I don't know, like, does he think like just going
dude.
into Apache territory could just drum that up? I just like, I mean, it's fairly delusional, but like
Oh, it's
maybe that's his
totally.
motive. I mean, yeah, I mean, absolutely delusional, but like it's maybe his motivation? Question mark.
Yeah, or he thinks that's what the plan is after they complete this mission and bury her son, and they're gonna go rob some other bank and go start get slaves. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
His whole thing is, but it is funny, I guess. I don't know. It certainly gives the movie something else because it is a movie that like could use a lot more probably humor or something else because it's a little bit
I guess so.
dry. I
It
mean,
is.
I don't know.
It
I
is.
don't know if humor would help, but I guess it does feel like there's a lot of pretty dry patches.
It does. I mean, I think something would help. Yeah, no, it is weird though because like the whole kind of building a slave Indian army is almost treated as kind of like a comedy bit, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is kind of, I don't know, this is kind of weird that we're treating this wild racism so kind of lightly. I don't know, like it's the early '60s, I guess, but still, even that at that stage, I don't know, feels weird.
It definitely feels weird. And it also feels like, I mean, maybe it's just supposed to be funny because it's so far-fetched and like
Cause it's
absurd
so
of an
crazy.
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, it's so absurd, like it's a racism of a
Although,
level that's so absurd. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
yeah, I don't know
that's why
either.
it's been treated like that. Um, but no, I mean, I think so. I obviously I kind of I was reading into the backstory of it. I've been reading kind of like different perspectives, different reviews and stuff like that. And I saw somebody on Letterboxd refer to this movie as being emotionally inert, and I think that's kind of true. I, I think
Yeah.
I
Mm.
think like if I think if there was, even if it wasn't like done through humor, even if the like
Sure.
if this movie was, even if you went in the other direction and made the movie darker, or if you just like felt the emotion
Yeah.
more, if
Yeah.
they found a way to like feel the emotion more of like Brian Keith's revenge and feel the emotion more of like Maureen O'Hara's grief, like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it just feels it's that at this kind of constant kind of relatively flat tone of like
Mm.
nothing's really conveyed. It doesn't hit you emotionally. The grief of losing a son,
No.
they don't convey that emotion, and they don't convey that kind of that kind of burning vengeance that is overtaking this person beyond reason. So neither kind of hits you. What you're left with is just kind of often, and there's stretches where it's just kind of two people wandering through the desert next to a wagon and not much else, like it
Yeah.
just,
And they don't like each other, but
yeah.
they're not even really talking. You're just like, all right.
Occasionally and eventually they kind of like each other. And they get and also like, I don't know what you felt about like, I don't think any of the acting's really really bad. I think like Stephen Cochrane's pretty good as Billy. Chills Wills
Hmm.
is pretty good as
Yeah.
Turk. Brian Keith is a solid if slightly uninteresting male lead. And Maureen
Yes.
O'Hara, I think is pretty. I think
Yeah.
is
I think she's
probably. I think
the
she's the.
best,
I think she's
probably.
the
Yeah.
best. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
she's the MVP of the movie. She actually has
Yeah.
conveys the most emotion and is the most interesting
Yeah.
character of anybody on the screen.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And a
yeah.
good female role for that time, which makes
Yeah.
sense then that this was kind of trying to be a star vehicle for her. Makes
Yeah.
sense that this was that's the way it is, but a pretty good character for that period for her, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because she's a pretty strong female character. She doesn't take any shit from the other characters. She never lapses fully into kind of damsel in distress territory. You
No.
know, um,
Well, and we
like
should say that like even they end up going and Brian Keith feels obligated to go, but even in the beginning, it seems like he and the other two are trying to dissuade her of even doing this, you know?
yeah,
Like they're definitely trying to talk her out of it throughout the thing at certain points. Just like, okay, it was just like, and there's a moment where later on where they have to bury their wagon, but it seems like she thinks Brian Keith is like gonna just try and bury the kid there in the middle of wherever they are, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, no, absolutely. So like she remains committed to her journey mission throughout the story and never kind of wavers from that. And yeah, and so she's kind of portrayed as relatively, particularly for the time, relatively emotionally complex because it's not like she's totally
Yeah,
fearless. She definitely is scared at certain points, but her mission that she's on always trumps that any kind of fear she is feeling on
yeah,
that. So like, it's there so she's not one note either. She's not just a one note kind of badass either. Like, she's
no.
got different shades to her, for sure.
Well, and I feel like it would be easy and pretty common in this period of film for her to have been portrayed as just like kind of a crazy character. And they're, for
Mm,
whatever reason, going along with this mission to like please her. But it would, but the movie would almost sit outside and seem like this lady's crazy, but we're going to indulge her. I feel
hmm.
like a lot of movies from this period would have went that way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that like yeah, I definitely think that that would be a direction that a lot of movies because yeah, the early 60s, this yeah, definitely would have gone in that direction of like just kind of like all this the classic trope, I guess, of the hysterical woman. She's the
Yeah.
and she'd just be. I think she'd be portrayed much more as kind of like crying and wailing all the time, and kind of like just being hysterical. And she's not that. She's not that.
No, yeah.
Yeah, she has moments of which, of course, the grieving mother. Of course, she has moments of kind of that, but she never tips. She never tips into kind of a hysterical stereotype of that you probably would have got in a lot of other films. Yeah, made at this time. So it's interesting because we do have this kind of thing of like, and I feel like this will is a theme that I'll come back to often in the Peckinpah series. Is like there's this weird push pull of like there's a bunch of problematic stuff and then there's a bunch of stuff that's actually fairly progressive for the time. Like it, and I think like Peckinpah is often painted with the brush of being kind of, particularly maybe for younger viewers, maybe kind of problematic and kind of symptomatic of like kind of toxic masculinity and that kind of the
Mhm.
kind of language we tend to use now. But I often feel with Peckinpah, this is maybe not the greatest example of it, but like I often feel with Peckinpah movies throughout his career he is both a symbol of toxic masculinity, but also somebody who consistently satirizes and has commentary on toxic masculinity at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. Because you can see that he is kind of a victim of it, probably personally, is like wrapped up in some of that, but can also has the, ability to see it objectively at times and see how ridiculous it all really is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think like, and I guess like this is an interesting film in Peckinpah's career because obviously it's a debut film, but like we kind of you briefly mentioned the circumstance of the film that basically he wasn't allowed to touch the script at all. And like his reputation till this point was not so much as a director, but more as a writer of television westerns. He'd written a number
Mhm.
of episodes of the likes of Gunsmoke and The Rifleman. He directed some of those episodes as well, but like he's actually at this point had written more than he had directed, like for a number of shows. But he wasn't allowed to touch the script, and then he was locked out of the edit as well. Basically, as soon
Wow.
as as
Yeah.
soon as shooting finished, like he was off the production, and and then I think the producer, Maureen O'Hara's brother, Charles B. Fitzsimmons, had a much bigger say in the edit, and also because as is Peckinpah's want, he always goes in a more darker territory. They changed the ending.
Okay.
Peckinpah's ending was different to the ending that we get. that we get here, or they change part of the ending. I don't know if the very end is the same, but
Yeah.
they change part of the ending. Um, so I mean, I guess we're kind of jumping about, so like maybe we can
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about that now. So basically, apparently in Peckinpah's director's cut, Yellowleg at the end of the movie, despite the monologue from Kit, kills Billy in cold blood. Just walks up to him, shoots him. That's it. Billy's dead. Whereas obviously in the final cut that we see, it
Yeah.
is suggested that Billy is killed by Turk from the rooftops,
Right.
rather than killed by Yellowleg. So it's much more tied up as a kind of happy ending, um, as if Yellowleg has taken in Kit's kind of monologue of like how she couldn't love a cold-blooded killer, and that's how they end up all happy at the end, on the wagon, riding off, literally riding off into the
Yes,
sunset,
yeah, I
which is
know.
which is
Pretty,
funny. Funny when you
yeah.
literally see that happen in a Western. You know, that's the kind
Yeah.
of joke. It's like
I
that's
know,
how
and that's
Westerns
like
end.
such a I could see that probably drove Peckinpah crazy. In addition, I can't imagine that would want to be his final shot either, because that just feels like a movie. That feels like a shot from a movie 20 years earlier or something. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, now they're literally riding off into the sunset. After
yeah.
all that's happened, even though it has wrapped up in this version as, they kind of took a moral stand to the two villains.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. So he comes across as more noble, because like he doesn't kill Billy in this version. He's killed by Turk, and then he doesn't kill Turk either. Like he's he is arrested by the townsfolk who actually that is quite funny. Like
Yeah, so I was gonna say,
like when the townsfolk ride in, and like the mayor and the other townsfolk ride in, the pastor and stuff like that, and they're like, "What? I thought you were scared to come here because it's Apache territory." And it's like, well, when there's money on the line,
yeah, yeah,
that's
that
a
is
different
great.
story.
Yeah.
um. So yeah, I mean, it definitely this film definitely has moments. Like it
Hmm.
definitely. Every so often it'll be like, oh, that's great, or that, and like, and even like, kind of going back a bit, again, showing that Maureen O'Hara's character kind of knows how to handle herself, and also like a good bit of direction from Peckinpah is the scene in the cave. And
Hmm.
like where she kills the Apache guy who's kind of been tracking Yellowleg's
Yeah,
character, and kind of menacing them. And then they
yeah,
have the final kind of confrontation where he tries to jump her in the cave, and there's this like crack of lightning, and you just see him for a moment, and
yeah,
then he kind of jumps down in the dark, and then she shoots her him sorry and I thought that was a really memorable, just as an
yeah.
image. I thought that was really
Hmm.
pretty good.
Yeah, that might be maybe the best like scene or
Yeah,
sequence, honestly. Yeah,
yeah.
probably the best like action in the movie.
I think so, because like as much as we get a few shootouts, none of them are that memorable.
No, and they don't feel like that dangerous or intense.
Yeah,
Even towards the end when I mean, we didn't mention Yellowleg's like shoulder injury was part of his, or it seems like that was part of the scalping thing, or maybe that was a separate thing.
yeah,
But
I
basically,
think so.
his shooting arm is kind of disabled. So every time it like you can see him wince when he's like trying to shoot and he can't really shoot. Even at that point when he's chasing Turk, I felt like it should have felt more urgent because I'm like, oh man, this guy shouldn't really be getting in a gunfight. Like every time he picks up his
Yeah,
gun, he's like in pain and he can't really like aim. So we should be like
yeah.
really worried.
We should be much more worried than we are, but we're not, because like in a sense it does set it up nicely, because like there is a moment, definitely, where Turk and Billy are riding behind Yellowleg and Kit, and like and they're just I, they're doing that thing where, like Turk and Billy are such weird characters because they're intermittently menacing and intermittently just like our comic relief. Like they're such strange characters.
Yeah.
But during one of their intermittent menacing periods, they keep talking about like kind of like shooting Yellowleg, but like no, I don't want to shoot him in the back. And then there's a moment where Yellowleg like turns round and that tries to aim his gun at Billy, and his gun just like falls out his hand. And he has to get off his horse and pick his gun back up, and like. So again, there should be like in that final confrontation with Billy and Turk, there should be like a lot of tension there because like you're like, well, this guy, I mean, because we see, and when he goes to the doctor, he's got like a serious injury just at his shoulder, just at
Mhm.
kind of his clavicle there. So there should be a lot of tension there, but it's just again, everything kind of just feels very kind of one level, one note, kind of very flat, tonally, and
Yeah.
it just never comes across.
No, and that would have been a good obstacle for his character to have if they could have played that up more the whole movie because he could have been much more uh not disabled, but he could be kind of physically weaker while he's trying to help her do all this stuff. And we could see that it's just kind of his will is all
Mm.
that's driving him. But this guy's like kind of about to fall apart. And
Yeah,
it would make his mission of revenge even more tense and kind of ridiculous because it's like, oh man, like you shouldn't even be out here helping this lady and stuff, and you're over here planning to go kill these guys, and you're like really not up to the task.
yeah. And they could have done it in such a way that kind of like he finally manages, like we're rooting for him. And he finally manages to do it despite the pain. Just he's so
Yeah,
kind of crazed by revenge, kind of not dissimilar to the original Django, where like
yeah,
Django is like this great gunman, who's like who just seems like this invincible badass who like never misses. And then later on in the film, he's shot in both of his hands. And like there's a period of the film where he can like barely pick up a gun. But then he still manages to like kill everybody in the end just through sheer craziness. And they could,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
guess like I mean, he wouldn't obviously Django's like later 60s and it's Italian, so like obviously it's way more bloody and crazy. But so obviously it's 61, like I'm not expecting it to be as bloody and crazy as that, but
yeah.
we could have had something similar where it feels like the odds are now impossible, but somehow he overcomes them. And then that's the real kind of fist pump moment at the end of the movie.
Yeah, totally. And it's built in there and it's not really there. Yeah, we have that groundwork, or at least
Yeah.
some of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And it yeah, I guess that's why I came out of the film kind of like not being a big fan of the film. Not I was just like so much of it's so dry.
mhm.
And there's so many periods of just like it just feels like we got a lot of nothing. Quite beautiful nothing though. I mean, like
Yeah, yeah.
because like the cinematographer on this had shot a couple of John Ford movies. It was shot in Arizona on location, and like it makes again. So we got a bunch of very nice epic vistas.
Mhm.
So I guess like at that time. Arizona had been shot so much in the 40s and 50s that they really knew how to shoot the shit out of it by 1961. So it looked quite beautiful, but yeah, so much of it's just very dry, very pedestrian, and I think like I'm almost harder on it as well because like we've kind of been talking about, it sets up a bunch of stuff that seems really juicy. So it seems to things that we could
Yeah.
really get our teeth into, and it just never. It takes a nibble out of it, but it never sinks its teeth in fully.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of stuff that's ripe. And it would be interesting. It would have been interesting, like if Peckinpah had been able to write to rewrite it, what he
Yeah,
might have brought out of it.
to
The
amend the script a
secrecy.
little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I feel
I'm sure it would have
relatively
been better.
confident. I feel relatively confident he would have fleshed some things out a bit more. And
Yeah.
I think he would have. I definitely think he would have made the revenge mission feel a bit more palpable than it is than what we get in this movie. So yeah, I would have been interested to see if he could have kind of toyed around with the script a bit more.
The other thing I was going to say that
Hmm.
occurred to me, I mean, not only so when Brian Keith accidentally shoots Kit's son, and at first they think that it was the bank robbers or whatever. There's a shootout. They don't know who shot him for sure. And he comes up and
Hmm.
says, "No, it was me. I shot him." He also doesn't even like explain himself at all, which is crazy. I mean, it makes sense for the stoicness of his character, but he doesn't, go, "Oh, I was trying to shoot these guys and I missed, and your son was behind them." He's just kind of like, "Yeah, I shot him," and walks away. And it's so dry, and there's never really even a scene, any preceding scene where he says like, "Hey, that was a total accident. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna help you." He never like explains
I,
it, which is
that is
a
the
little
weird.
crazy.
It is pretty crazy. And that does remind me, there is a scene towards the end before a kind of final confrontation, where Kit has like her monologue about like she couldn't love a cold-blooded killer, and then and then says like, can you love a woman like me? Which again kind of goes to suggesting that possibly she was a prostitute or whatever.
Mhm.
And but in that monologue, she kind of goes, she's talking about the death of her son, and she goes like, "I understand now that his death was an accident," and you're like,
Yes.
"How?"
Right. Like she just came to that conclusion independently, which
like
is crazy.
like what? We've been given no additional information. You've just
Yeah,
worked out
well,
through like
yeah, only we as the viewer know because we objectively saw what happened
yeah,
and we're like, "Oh, he missed."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're like, her, yeah, so that is wild when that comes up. Like, she's just like, I understand now. It was an accident. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? Did you
Okay.
get like instant replay at some point? Like, what is.
Yeah. Well, we also get what I thought was maybe the funniest moment to me is she says, "Can you love a woman like that?" I think she says that after he like reveals his scar and everything. She's like, "Oh, I
Yes,
saw
yes, yes.
you."
He like, yeah,
Yeah.
because he's like, he again, we're stuck with this thing where he never takes off his hat. And he's like, because he thinks of himself as so grossly disfigured, even though he's just got like a small cut
Yeah.
across his forehead. But anyway.
Yes. That whole thing is also, I'm like, that's a missed opportunity because yeah, you could have him actually be disfigured, which would be
Yeah.
much more interesting. It would make a little bit more sense why he has kind of like it also seems like he's in a sense given up on having any future because of this
Yeah.
disfigurement,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is how it's like played. So it's so funny when she's like, "I don't care about that." And then he wears his hat in a way to just let the scar be seen. And he has this goofy smile. And it's just this moment where it's just like, "Oh, well, I'm fine then." Like he's just like, "All right, cool. Well, if you can love me." And then it's like, "Well, do you still want to kill this guy? Like, why is this a big deal then?" It
Yeah.
makes his reason for revenge seem a little ridiculous, especially in comparison to her having lost a son. Like,
Yeah.
not that an attempted scalping would be like obviously would be a very traumatic experience, but it's not really comparable to a death. I
No,
don't know.
no, it's not. And like you say, like, yeah, it doesn't set up the right feel for like the final confrontation of like you
Oh
say,
yeah, definitely not.
because like as soon as he knows that she will love him, he's just like, cool. Like,
Yeah, they're like, well, okay.
and you're like, he goes from that to the like then snapping back into his like kind of stoic thing,
Yeah.
and then kind of rampaging off, as if he's in like his blood's really up, and you're like, but like 2 seconds ago you were like, yeah, you weren't in that space at all. Like it's a very strange transition.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work. It's almost, I mean, you almost need the Billy and Turk to become more villainous at that point or something, because they kind of have them held hostage. If they then burst in and try to kill them or do something, it would give you more motivation to fight back.
Yeah, yeah. Um, ah, and like again, not everything's like treated seriously. So you don't, for most of the movie, you don't really treat Billy and Turk as like serious villains because the thing of
Right.
like we discussed the kind of the ridiculousness of like Turk's delusions about building a slave army or whatever. And because like that's seen as so absurd, you don't necessarily see him as like really evil. You just think of him as like a kind of idiot lunatic. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and like kind of the same as Billy. Billy is presented as like there is a weird tone. The first two times that like the first two time that Billy assaults Maureen O'Hara's character by like forcing kissing on her,
Yeah.
it's treated with this kind of weird tone of like, well, shucks, lads will
Yeah.
be lads.
Yeah.
And then it's only like the third time where he's like rolling around in the mud and like properly
Yeah.
attempting to rape her. It's only that third time where is it treated with any seriousness. Like the other two times were treated so glibly, so kind of
Yeah.
for comedy almost,
Hmm.
that like it's just yeah, it's weird. I think it's weird. I mean, like I think all three things should be treated like seriously, and then we kind of and made more of a deal of, so we're more kind of
Yeah.
presented Billy as like this is the first time he forces there's because they're in the in the bar stroke church. That we should be like kind of seen as like that's a nasty act rather than the kind of almost comedy effect that it's given or tone that is given in that particular scene.
Yeah. Well, and it would have, and if it was treated more seriously, it gives uh Yellowleg more fodder to have a conflict with Billy,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like another point where this character who potentially is kind of morally gray or just there for revenge and gets swept up in this thing is like, you can't do that. Again, it would be interesting because then it's like you give him another moral line that this guy's going to draw,
Mhm.
even though he's ostensibly, just on a revenge mission to murder someone.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be,
Yeah, so if they treated all three occurrences seriously, which they don't treat the one in the bar seriously. They don't treat the one where she falls in the water and then he tries to kiss her again. They don't treat that
yeah.
seriously, and it's only the one later on where it's much more of an attempted rape that they finally treat it seriously, which feels kind of too little, too late.
Yeah, it feels like up to that point, and for most of the movie, it's kind of like, oh, Billy's just a handful. That guy, whatever. Like it's
Yeah,
very,
he's very
yeah,
treated much like that. Like he's just mischievous, not that he's evil. He's just
yes,
like,
yes,
like it's like the movie is continually kind of like tousling his hair and being like, no, what a no,
yeah,
you come on, you scamp, stop
yeah,
that. Like and then and then he's suddenly presented as kind of evil, and you're like, oh, okay, right, he's the big bad. Okay, fair enough. Um, so it's this very strange tonal shifts with Billy and Turk's characters.
yeah. And I think Turk isn't really menacing enough either.
No.
That's part of where, like, I feel like the revenge plot loses some steam too, because that guy is he's so on another planet with the shit he's talking about that I'm just like, I don't know. How can you even want revenge from this guy doesn't even remember Scalp. This guy's like in another reality.
Yeah,
It's
no,
kind of
that's
hard.
it's hard to treat him seriously, and it's also hard to treat him seriously as a threat because the way
Yeah.
he's presented, because like now we don't know if this is one of Turk's many many lies, but like the way it's presented is like Billy is younger. It seems like they have like a long-standing relationship. Turk kind of intimates that like he taught him how to shoot or whatever, and but
Right.
the way his character's presented is like maybe there was one time where he was like a ruthless kind of outlaw. Maybe there was one time where he was a really good shot, but he's now been drunk for like,
Right.
I don't know, like, he's like 10, 15 years past his prime. And he's now just like a kind of useless drunk mainly. So like, I think that that's why partly he doesn't feel threatening as well, because it just seems like he's so far past what his kind of shooting prime would have been.
Mhm. Well, and that could be more fodder for the revenge thing, like for making the revenge more complex. I feel
Mm.
like it could have been more complex if Brian Keith encounters this guy and is just like, you know, kind of stops being hot-blooded and is thinking about this because it's not the person who attacked him 5 years ago. In essence, this is a changed person, or obviously, he could do other things with his character, but it could have been an interesting wrinkle.
Yeah, I guess like because it could have made the revenge more emotionally complex because you're not taking on an equally formidable opponent. You're taking on like a guy who is past his prime, has obviously crawled into the bottom of a bottle and never really come up. So like so it's
Doesn't
an
even
unfair fight.
remember.
Like you could
Yeah,
easily dispatch him at any time. So. Yeah, yeah, that could have been emotionally interesting. Had some resonance. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
yeah.
Uh,
I also thought, as we're getting to the end, that if Brian Keith's reason for revenge was stronger, it could have been an interesting parallel if instead of it being the scalping thing, if he had lost a loved one and that's the motivation for his revenge, would be really interesting if that were the case. And then for him to accidentally kill someone else's child and be involved in that burial process, but still want to be seeking revenge would be like a really interesting thing to be at odds with.
yeah, no, I think there's a lot that could be played with that. I think that would be a fascinating route for the movie to go. But yeah, it doesn't take any of those routes. It's yeah, and I think there's definitely. I mean, while I wasn't a big fan of the movie, I think if I had seen this in isolation in the early 60s or whatever, um, there's enough in it that I would have thought like maybe I could give this director another go. Maybe like like there's enough kind of interesting seeds of things that you're like there's talent there, and you can and across the
Yeah.
board because some of the actors are pretty good. The cinematography is good. I think like I wouldn't say Peckinpah's direction is exceptional by any standards, but it's solid. It's
Yeah.
certainly it's maybe a bit workmanlike, but it certainly shows promise. So, and I think that's part of the frustration of the movie that like it's not like a straight up bad movie.
No, yeah.
It has interesting things, but it just never fully develops them.
Well, in knowing Peckinpah, we know how much darker or more complex of a movie he will go on to make, where you're like, this has that potential in
Yeah,
places.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it is interesting because like I wrote this down because obviously Maureen O'Hara was not the biggest fan of Peckinpah. Obviously Keith seemed to have a relationship with him, and it was him who suggested it, so he seemed fine with him. But Maureen O'Hara was quoted as saying that he didn't know how to direct, and I love this quote, that he is one of the strangest and most objectionable people I have ever worked with.
It's hilarious.
Which is Oh, what a line.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and by that stage, she'd been in the business since the tail end of the 30s. So like, she'd worked with a lot of people. And also like
yeah,
some strange people as well. Hitchcock has a reputation for being a bit of an odd dude, and she worked with him early in her career on Jamaica Inn, not one of Hitchcock's kind of fetid pictures. It's
yeah.
generally seen as one of his weakest, but so she's met some interesting individuals, but apparently Peckinpah was the strangest and most objectionable of them all.
Oh, that's hilarious. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't. It must have been interesting because it definitely doesn't seem to. It's interesting that she obviously is kind of the impetus for the movie being made, but it does feel like in within the context of the movie's much more focused on Brian Keith,
Yeah,
and it seems like that's Peckinpah's focus, or the character that he's concerned with too. So yeah,
yeah, I think
kind of
so.
an
Like,
interesting dynamic.
I think he tried to skirt around it a little bit in terms of like the contract of like him, he can't change the screenplay. I think he
Yeah,
kind of worked one on one with Brian Keith and kind of improvised a couple of things and like tried to improve his lines a little bit. But like, so I think there was some sort of I definitely read that he tried to do things with the Brian Keith character, and um, obviously having this back history with him of working on this television show with him, obviously he had the strongest connection with that actor. So yeah, and I guess like as I go on with this podcast, I guess like there is certain people who he clearly builds a connection with, that
yeah.
he'll go on with, and it seems like he's pretty loyal by people he builds a connection with. So yeah,
Well, and in here, I mean, I don't know if he'd worked with Chill Wills or Struthers Martin before, but he definitely these guys are going to pop back up in other movies.
yeah, they come back up. I'm not sure. Yeah, I didn't read up on that. Like, I mean, obviously they are in the wheelhouse. They're in a lot of westerns.
Yeah,
I mean, like they might have come across. Like, I mean, I kind of briefly mentioned, um, you know, Peckinpah had written a lot of episodes for various television westerns, which were very popular at the time. Gunsmoke and The Rifleman being the most prominent of those. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had done that. Or what I didn't know as well is like in the show he created, The Westerner. Like I think it's the first episode of that. Warren Oates is in it, so like he's like
oh wow,
Warren Oates is way back from the beginning. So obviously they had a connection right off from very
yeah,
early on in their respective careers, which is it's quite fun. Um,
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. For sure. So like, yeah, Peckinpah would definitely go on to bigger and better things. For sure. But yeah, I don't think it's interesting though because I'm not sure. I'll need to double check. I was going to say I'm not sure Brian Keith does recur, but like, I need to double check that. Um,
yeah. I don't
I,
think
I don't, I
so,
don't
but
think so. I think like
yeah,
the extent of it is just the television show, and then this film, and then that's it. And obviously, Brian Keith went on to do other things, and Peckinpah went on to do other things. Um, so even though this film was not a success, it seems like it was a happy ending for most of them because like the Parent Trap gave O'Hara her second wind, and Peckinpah would go on to bigger and better things almost immediately,
yeah.
because like he had his first success with his next movie, Ride the High Country, which we'll obviously talk about in the
Yeah.
next episode. And that was just the year later. That was 62. And again, that is not one that I've seen, but I'm looking forward to that because
Oh,
that has a very strong reputation, and
yes.
unlike this largely forgotten film.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm excited for you to see that one. I really like that movie. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it too. And so, do you have any kind of fit? I like as a number of these podcasts have um that focus on an individual. Like they'll
Mhm.
ask questions at the end, and so I've come up with some questions.
Sure.
But before the questions, do you have do you have any final thoughts on the Deadly Companions?
I mean, I feel like it's just one for the purists. It's
Mm,
really
yeah,
one
yeah.
to see if you're that interested in Peckinpah and see kind of some of the seeds of his work. But yeah, it's kind of
Mm.
ultimately forgotten for a reason.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. There's some interesting stuff. There is some thematic things that we will touch on many times throughout the season. Yeah, it's very much a kind of stamped, kind of completist only, which kind of gives a spoiler on one of the questions I'm about to ask. But like it's fine, it's fine. So I thought it would be fun. Peckinpah is most he's a complex character, but I think reputation wise, for people, particularly people on the outside who maybe are not dug into his work, is known primarily for violence and nihilism. Is kind of his thing. He's it's a a morally bleak world that is often brutally violent. So, on that scale, I've come up with a couple of scales. The first scale is the Bloody Sam scale,
Ugh.
which is so a one would be a bloodless Sam, and a five would be the bloodiest Sam. So on the Bloody Sam scale, what are we giving this movie?
It's
What?
it's hard to not give it a one, but he does have like Junior Bonner, which is a movie that's just about a rodeo star, which really doesn't even, I don't think there's just fist fights. So I guess we'd give this like a two because there are
Okay.
shootouts.
I guess relatively bloodless shootout, but yeah, I guess. And then we got the little kind of naff scar disfigurement. It's like the
Yeah.
disfigurement should have been much worse. But yeah, okay, we can go with a two. Yeah, I think that's a two. Um, that's a two. So and then there's the nihilism scale, which I'll call the Nietzsche scale. So one
Uh,
Nietzsche would be kind of like, yeah, pretty chirpy, and five Nietzsches would be like bleak as all hell.
oh, I feel like that's also like two, maybe
Two,
three. We got some decent like
I
social
guess.
commentary
Yeah,
there with
yeah.
the church and the bar, and like you said at the very end, when the townsfolk are like, "Well, when there's money at stake, we'll do whatever, but we don't care about this lady and her kid."
Yeah, that's
I,
true. That's true. So we are still, it is still like, despite the fact we have a kind of tacked on happy ending, I guess we are still pretty bleak. So yeah, maybe three Nietzsches, maybe somewhat bleak. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah, that's true. So and then the last question, is like basically, do you give this movie a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Which in this podcast I'm going to call, is it a peckin' yeah or a peckin' nah?
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think it's a pecking
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I agree. I think it is. On Letterboxd, I gave it 2 stars. I was toying with giving it 2.5, but just particularly in the middle of the section in the movie is just so boring. There's just nothing. It's just we're just we are
Yeah.
literally spinning our wheels, like spinning
Yes.
our wagon wheels. That
And
is that
it
is what we're doing, and it's just yeah, yeah,
it's such a simple plot too that you're like, okay, are we at the town yet? Like, how much
yeah,
further is it? What else is
yeah.
what else can happen?
Yeah, are we gonna get an attack or something? Like, is something
Yeah.
gonna is villains going to appear? Like, just anything. Give us anything. But no, it gives us very, very little. So I agree. It is a pecking nah for me too. So yeah, that's it. We've that's our debut episode in the books. But this is interesting because like you have written and directed your first feature. Is that
Yes,
correct? Is your
that's
first feature?
correct. Yeah.
And like it must be like a similar. Like it's very good because we're talking about Peckinpah's first feature.
Yeah.
You've done your first feature. He was when this movie was made, he was 36. You would be a similar age, right?
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm 37.
Oh, very
I
close.
finished I finished it before my birthday, so I would have been 36.
You'd
Yeah.
still be 36. So
Yeah.
like
There
how
you go.
perfect is that?
Yeah.
So
That's kind of amazing.
tell us a little bit about your first film. Tell us a little about whatever
Yeah.
you want to tell us about. Yeah.
Sure.
Mhm.
So it's called Arcane, and it's just a little psychological horror film. Basically, a guy is looking for his missing brother who is mentally ill and also kind of mixed up with drug dealers and possibly this kind of obscure cult. And it just kind of gets weirder from there. But wrote and directed it, and Craig Dram, who's been a guest on the show, and I think is going to be again appearing on one of these Peckinpah episodes.
He will be
Has
appearing on one of the like just in case anybody who's not aware of my previous shows and has just dipped into this. Yes, he is he's the regular co-host on my other regular podcast, All 90s Action, all the time. And yes, he will
Yes.
definitely appear on one of these Peck and Pie episodes. I won't reveal which one yet, but he will definitely appear.
Yes. Well, he's in it and he helped produce it. And yeah, we're just making the festival rounds at this point and seeing where it goes. So it's exciting.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yeah, and yeah, if you do have any more information about that, I can definitely put it in the show notes when this episode comes out.
Awesome.
Probably. So this is either come out at the end of 2025 or the start of 2026. I'm not quite sure yet, but whenever you listen to it, yeah. This when it comes out. So yeah, I'll definitely give it information. So it's been great chatting to you
Yeah.
once again, Kyle. It's
You
always
too.
fun recording with you, and yeah, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And yes, do join us again next month when, as I mentioned, I will be talking all about Ride the High Country. Until then, see ya.